All right. I think everything's ready. Except, okay, hello, I'm sorry. What I'm doing is recording the lecture. And I will be posting the recordings in a module on Canvas, but you are welcome to record yourself. So if you wanted to bring your phones up and leave them up here and record, that'd be fine. Or you can try to record from where you're sitting. So it should be okay. So we'll have those available to you. Okay. So there are a couple of things that I wanted to just check in with you about. The first thing is that just to remind you of the structure of the class, so that you come to lectures on Tuesday, Thursday from 1 to whenever. And then you come to one lab a week, either on Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, or Tuesday afternoon. You clear on that? So all of you at this point should have attended a lab. I do have one extra lab handout if you were missing that. So all of you are clear on that. How many of you are on the wait list? Cool. Okay. So some of you, there were a few who were very high up that I gave ad codes to. For the rest of you, if you want to, you can hang out, and then we'll make our decisions at the end of lecture today. So we'll see how many people show up in the next few minutes, and that will help determine how many I can accept. I can accept a lot of you. I don't know if I'm going to be able to accept all of you. So we may have a Hunger Games kind of situation. Okay. All right. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is I asked you, or I was hoping maybe you would remember what the big ideas are. So I want you to take 1 second without looking at your notes, just from your memory, try to write down at least 2 of the big ideas. What were they? Okay, so what was one that you remembered and wrote down? Just shout it out. You don't have to.
Structure.
Oh, go ahead. You raise your hand. What's that?
Structure relating to biology.
It does.
There's a hierarchical structure, so it's molecules, atoms, organelles.
Okay.
And
And what were you
I
going
was
to
gonna
say?
say structure related to a function.
Yes. So. It does relate to biology as well. That is true. But I think we said structure relates to function, and then the other one you said is the hierarchical biological. Levels. So sometimes these are called structural levels. Those are the same thing. We can add organization. So the biological or structural levels of the organization of the body. So those are those hierarchical structures. Do you remember what? Oh, and then there was one other. What other big idea?
Evolution?
Yes, so, human bodies are the product of evolution. Absolutely. So those are our three main themes, as we go along. What are the biological levels? Do you remember what they are? Molecules, cells, even before cells are organelles, which are the building blocks of cells, right? Which would, an example of an organelle would be a nucleus. So atoms, molecules, organelles, cells, tissues, organs, organ systems. Okay, and organism. Okay. So, so these are the biological levels. And, so that was one of the things that we talked about as being an organizing principle for our class as well as for anatomy. So, so the three big ideas are structure relates to function, biological levels, and evolution. What is an example that we have talked about it that could you give an example of structure relates to function? And this could be from lab as well. Is there something that you remember?
Skeletal muscles. Controlling.
Yeah, skeletal muscles, like, for example, the gluteal muscles, determine movement, and the shape of those really determine what they can do, right? So where they attach on the skeleton, the shape of the bones. Good, yes. I love that. So both of those are great examples of how structure relates to function. What do we mean by function? We mean what you're able to do. So you were talking about the lumbar curve. Where is the lumbar curve? It's where? Yes, it's at the base of the spine in your lower back, right? So that lumbar curve, what does that enable you to do again? Stand up. Absolutely. So we looked at that in lab comparative anatomy. The cat has that kind of bridge, almost arch shaped vertebral column, whereas we have that extra curve where we have basically brought our body upright over our lower limbs. Good. Structure relates to function. So we will come back to that over and over and over again. And you've already learned a lot. Okay. So I am gonna go to another let's see. Oh. Sorry. All right. So the concept of structural hierarchy is that each level builds on the level below. So we talked about that atoms and molecules, cells, etc. So this is a molecule, and this molecule, so this is, I get bored with humans sometimes. So this is actually just looking at an animal. So this is a zebra, but because the zebra is a mammal, it has the same body systems that we do. So we can use the same principle here. At the molecular level, what molecule is this depicting? I'm not sure if you can read it. You might recognize it. It is the twisted ladder that is in all of our cells. What is that? DNA. So DNA is a molecule. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the molecular level. There are different kinds of molecules. So in terms of the biological levels, atoms combine to form molecules. So molecules are more complex structures than atoms themselves. In humans and in all living things, we have really complex molecules called organic molecules, or sometimes they're called biomolecules. They're the same thing. These organic molecules come in four flavors. Okay, so and seriously, they are kind of like flavors. So carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, which include fats, right? Lipids, and nucleic acids. So we talked about this a little bit the other day. These four organic molecules make up the structures of your cells and of your complete body. So nucleic acids are mainly about information molecules. So the kinds of information they carry is genetic information, including DNA and RNA. A related kind of nucleic acid molecule is ATP. And that has a different function. That is an energy carrier for this cell. How many of you have heard of ATP? So ATP is a molecule that is necessary for doing cellular work. So we basically transform the food that we eat into, we capture the energy in those molecules, such as carbohydrates like glucose. We capture the energy from those molecules and transfer it to ATP. And ATP can then be used to do the kinds of work that our cells do, including movement. Okay, so that's why you require a lot of energy when you go out for a run or something, because you're using that energy to move your muscles. Okay, and you need fuel to do that, right? So the food is the fuel. All right. So biomolecules, and then the next level is cells. Right? And this is one of the things that I want to look at in this slide is here we have molecules which then build the cells and the cellular components. So this particular cell that we're looking at, there are some 200 different kinds of cells in our body. So they have different shapes and different functions. This particular cell is indicating a heart muscle cell. Okay, so this is a cardiac muscle cell. Inside that cell are going to be organelles, little tiny structures within the cell. And someone mentioned earlier a nucleus is an example. So the purple dot in this picture represents the nucleus of this cell. You're going to be looking at these cells under the microscope later in the semester. So you're going to see a slide that looks exactly like this circle, right? And this is cardiac muscle tissue. So a tissue is a group of cells that works together to perform some specific function. Let me say that again. A group of cells that works together to perform a specific function. So cardiac muscle tissue forms the sheets of muscle that make up the walls of the heart. So these muscle cells are able to move, to contract. And the purpose of them is to squeeze the walls of the heart so that it pumps blood, right? So, okay, so you've got this specific kind of cell that is arranged in a very specific fashion in tissues that enables it to work to pump our blood. So that tissue is a very important component of the organ, which is the heart. So the heart is composed, what is our definition of an organ? So an example is the heart. What is the definition of an organ? Two or more tissues, okay? So there are different kinds of tissues in the body, and we're gonna be going over those, but there are three types of muscle tissue. There is nervous tissue. There are connective tissues, okay? So the heart is an organ because it must have more than just cardiac muscle tissue. That's its main ingredient. But it also, what would the heart need to have within it? In fact, what is one of the major causes of a heart attack? Do you know? Do you have relatives who have, yeah,
Don't be recording on.
gunk in the coronary arteries? Okay, so a heart needs to have arteries and blood. Blood is actually a tissue. Blood is a liquid tissue. And so the heart consists of more than one tissue. It also has nervous tissue, right? That moderates whether or not it's beating very quickly or more slowly. Okay, so it is an organ. It's a complicated structure that has more than one tissue. And then that organ is part of an organ system. And in this case, the organ system would be the circulatory system. So the purpose of the heart is to beat blood. So the circulatory system consists of the heart, but it also consists of other organs, including the blood vessels. The blood vessels themselves, the arteries and veins, are organs. Why would they be considered to be organs? What is our definition of an organ? Two or more tissues. So for example, an artery is a tube, right? And it is built out of smooth muscle, but it's also wrapped with connective tissue. Okay, so it consists of more than one type of tissue. So the circulatory system, like all body systems, has more than one organ in it, and it performs some kind of big function. So the circulatory system, the whole point of it is that you have the heart is a pump, the arteries and veins are tubes, the blood is the liquid tissue that is pumped around the body. So from the heart and back to the heart, circulatory, it's a circle. Okay, cool. I had a lot of coffee. I'm into it. Circulatory system. So this is a really important concept, this hierarchical kind of vision of the body, from the atoms to molecules to tissues to organ systems to the organism. So all of these pieces work together to form this incredible thing, which is that zebra or a human. So each of these levels builds on the level before it. It becomes more complex as you go up the levels. All right, so how do we know what we know? Well, anatomy is an old science. So people have been studying anatomy for millennia. People all over the world, I mean, we have a concept of modern anatomy, but you know, people have always known a lot about the body, probably a lot more than we do. You think about hunters and gatherers from tens of thousands of years ago. They may not have done formal dissections, but they certainly cut apart animals, right? So they knew about the body, they knew about human bodies. But we have had some advances. So anatomy for most of the time that it's been a science, quote unquote, has been based on dissection. So in the Renaissance and in the, 1600s, people dissected bodies and described the location and the shape of things, bones, for example, whatever. And so dissection is still a central part of studying anatomy today. That's why we have cadavers. That's why we're going to do heart dissections. You cut things apart. In fact, the word anatomy in Latin means to cut, to cut. You cut stuff up, you figure out how it works, right? I love doing that, so can't wait. But there are other aspects to anatomy besides just dissection, and a lot of that was really brought to light in the scientific revolutions that happened in the 20th century. So really the atomic, molecular, and cellular structures and functions were delved into with a lot more depth in beginning 1950s. So why did I choose 1950s? 1950s, does anybody know, in terms of studies of biology, the molecular, understanding molecules, especially genes and genetics? Have you heard of Watson and Crick? Maybe not. It doesn't matter, but the structure. Working very well. The structure of DNA was described in 1953. So that was a really important year for understanding our own human biology, as well as the biology of every living thing. So 1953, the structure of DNA. Before the 1950s, people knew that DNA existed. They knew that it was the hereditary material that determined that you would have, that if you gave birth, you'd give birth to a human rather than a dog. Anyway, so DNA is important, right? The hereditary information. So people knew it was existing in the nucleus of cells, but they had no idea how it was shaped. And until they figured out the shape, they didn't know what it did. So DNA is basically a double-sided ladder that is twisted, right? And because of its shape, it can carry out its functions of copying itself before cell division and of providing information about how to build a body. You think about that, that's pretty incredible. You start out as a single-celled little critter, and then the DNA gives a message for how to build the skeletal system, the circulatory system, the nervous system, all that stuff. So those messages are contained in this, in a way, relatively simple molecule. It's like an amazing book that has instructions for how to build a body. So that was really figured out in the 1950s. They figured out the structure, in the following decades, in the 1960s and 1970s, they figured out how it works. So they figured out how that message in the DNA is translated into structures such as cells and tissues. And really, the message in DNA is for how and when even to build proteins. So genes are sections of DNA that give messages for how to build proteins. Proteins do everything in our body. So proteins form structure. The most abundant protein in your body is collagen. How many of you have heard of collagen? Yeah, okay. Where have you heard of it? I'm curious. In what context?
It's offers at Costco and counter for that.
You're darn right. It gets, you can buy protein powder, right? I use it in my smoothies, whatever. So you can buy collagen powder. And why would you do that?
For your joints.
For your joints, right? Okay, we're gonna talk about that. For what?
Well, the beauty industry tells us that they don't.
Yeah, so collagen, people spend billions of dollars for beauty products, for, like moisturizers or what have you, creams. Yeah. So things like beauty creams that have collagen. So for your joints is one thing, collagen for skin. You can do collagen injections. They look sort of funny, I think, sometimes, but that's okay. But why would they be selling it for joints and skin? Because it is the main structural protein of your body. It's also a major component of your bones. Okay, your skin, the cartilage of your joints, your bones, all of those, a main ingredient is collagen. Your bone cells produce collagen. Your skin cells produce collagen. Your cartilage cells produce collagen because they follow the directions in the DNA that says you need to build a bunch of collagen. Why would you eat powder that is collagen? Because it has the collagen that then you would digest, and the collagen is a protein that is built of amino acids, and those raw ingredients are in that powder. And you could get the same thing by eating something else that had protein. Yeah. Did you have a comment? All right, so 1953 was a landmark year because we started to figure all this stuff out. Proteins are important. All right, so we come forward in time, and in 2000, in the early 2000s, by 2003, something else had happened, and that was that the human genome was mapped. Early 2000s, we'll say. So the human genome is the library of human genes that code for proteins. Okay, so our DNA molecules, do you see how there are these rungs of a ladder? So they're like steps in a ladder. And the steps are broken in the middle. There are weak chemical bonds in the middle that hold the ladder together. But regardless, in humans, there are 3 billion steps, or what are technically called base pairs. So in each of your cells, there are these little teeny ladders that have 3 billion steps. All right. That contains all of the information for building all of the proteins that your body needs. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's fascinating. The genome was mapped. It was figured out which portions of the DNA code for proteins. But there were still a lot of missing information, and there still is a lot of missing information. We still don't know exactly what the message is for proteins often, so we don't know what, we know that this section is turned on in certain cells, but we don't even know what protein that codes for or what message it is. And then the other issue is that we don't know about what proteins specifically do sometimes. This really is important for medicine because, for example, a protein that is involved in Alzheimer's is beta amyloid, right? It has a function in normal nerve cells, but for some reason in that disease in Alzheimer's, it becomes misfolded, and that causes all of those problems that people have. Okay, so it really shows the importance of the connection between the genes and the proteins, and then what may happen to them in health and disease, right? Well, proteins only function if they are shaped correctly. This is another example of structure relates to function. Beta amyloid is in Alzheimer's is not shaped correctly. And the shape means that the proteins clump together and destroy the brain tissue. Yeah, so crazy, right? So 50 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to tell that story because we wouldn't have understood. So a lot has happened even in the last 20 years since the human genome was mapped, and now scientists are working on figuring out how the genes code for proteins and even how those proteins play out during our lifetime based on how we live our lives. What is the effect of exercise on how the proteins are built, how they're made, how they change in aging, right? So what is the influence of environment on how our genes play out? Yeah, it's pretty cool. Those are the kinds of questions that you're going to be dealing with as you go into healthcare into the future. So that is the basis, for example, of personalized medicine. Because now it's easy enough. There are lots of ethical issues, obviously, which you'll also be dealing with. But I mean, Ancestry.com, 23andMe, whatever, you can sequence DNA. You can change DNA by using CRISPR. Have you heard of CRISPR? So that's the technology to actually edit the genes and change the order within a person. I mean, that's crazy stuff. That's science fiction. But that has already been applied to diseases such as sickle cell disease, which is a genetic disorder, right? They have now used CRISPR to get at the root of the disease by changing a person's genes that code for protein, hemoglobin, in red blood cells that in sickle cell disease is mutated or changed. So this is a really new frontier in understanding human biology. It impacts every level of organization. You think about sickle cell disease is a good example. You change one base pair in the 3 billion base pairs of DNA. It's a mutation of 1 that leads to a change in a protein, which is hemoglobin. that leads to a change in cells, red blood cells. When a person is stressed for oxygen, who has sickle cell disease, the red blood cells change shape. Instead of being that beautiful, flexible, round shape, they become crescent shape. And not only that, they become rigid. So they stack up in the little teeny vessels of the body, and it leads to organ problems, not only in the vessels, but for example, the joints, in the heart, etc. And that can lead to the death of the individual if they don't receive treatment, right? That's an example of biological levels. Groovy? Interesting. So these are some of the things that we want to think about in terms of biological levels. You really can't understand health and disease unless you understand the lower levels of organization, the molecules and the cells and the tissues. Okay. All right. Okay, that was exciting. So we're gonna do a little, I don't know what we're gonna do. I was excited, I know that. Yeah, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna talk for just a second about this concept again, and then we're gonna do a little activity. So here we are. This should be familiar to you now, right? Do you understand this diagram? All right. So we're going to focus for a moment on just one level, and that level is the organ system. A lot of our class is really organized around the body systems, or the organ systems as they're called. So the first part of the class, we're talking about basic ideas and concepts. Next week, we're gonna talk a little bit about evolution, but we're also gonna get into the cell. So we're gonna talk about the structure and function of the cell, but then we're gonna talk about organ systems. There are 11 organ systems in the body. The first one that we're gonna talk about in lecture is the integumentary system. Integument means skin. So the integumentary system has as its largest organ the skin. Okay, but it's an organ system, so that must mean there are other organs besides the skin. Okay, well, the integumentary system is the covering of the body. What other organs would be in that? Any ideas? I mean, I'm not expecting you to know. I don't think I would have known before how about glands? Glands are organs. So the sweat gland, for example, consists of more than one type of tissue. So the integumentary system includes the skin, the nails, the hair. The skeletal system, I think that's fairly clear. What are the main organs in the skeletal system? Bones. Bones are organs, like a femur. That's an organ. Why? What is an organ? Two or more tissues. What kinds of tissues are in a femur? Osseous tissue or bone tissue is the main ingredient, with a lot of collagen, right? That has been mineralized. Okay. But what else then would it need? That's a mineral, which is cool. What is another tissue? Connected, totally. It's grafted connective tissue, just kind of like surround that living bone. What else would it require? For energy, you have to transport stuff to it in the blood. Yeah. So that blood is in every organ. So, yeah, blood, connective tissue, you guys are awesome. Osseous tissue. So The muscular system refers only to skeletal muscle. Okay. So there are three types of muscle tissue: smooth, cardiac, and skeletal. So the muscular system itself is only skeletal muscle. You should note that because it's actually kind of confusing. The muscular system is only skeletal muscle. By skeletal muscle, what I'm talking about is muscles that mostly connect to bones. So biceps brachii is an example. Triceps, abs, those are all skeletal muscles, okay? So the muscular system is going to be about movement. Endocrine, what is the endocrine system? What am I talking about there? Anybody have any idea? Hormones, exactly. So the endocrine system consists of organs, glands that produce hormones. Hormones are signals that, or messenger molecules that travel in the blood. What are some glands that produce hormones? Yeah. Thyroid, absolutely. So, yes, it is also a gland that is part of the endocrine system as well as other systems. Some organs are double duty, they are in more than one system. Circulatory system, what's the main organ? The heart. Lymphatic, what's that about? What? The lymph nodes are a main organ in the lymphatic system. What is their function? Immunity, right? Keeping you well, keeping you alive when you are infected with a virus or some kind of harmful bacteria. Respiratory? Lungs are the main organ, and respiratory system has to do with breathing. Digestive system, lots of different organs. What is one?
Yes.
The what? Guts. Yeah, I'll go for guts. We can divide that up a little bit into small intestine, large intestine. Yeah. Stomach, like I said. Urinary. Kidneys. Okay. So are the main organ, although they're more than just kidneys, but that's what comes to mind, right? Production of urine. Sometimes the urinary system is also called the renal system. So both are fine. And then reproductive is producing offspring. That's what the hell did I forget? Oh, there, yeah, I did. I mean, darn it, I did this. So the organ systems are those. I believe that as usual. Okay. That's fine. All right. Sorry, don't mind me. All right, so this is the 11 organ systems. And the reason I really put this down here is because this is a figure from your book that I find really useful. So this is figure 1.6. You can access this in the ebook in chapter 1, right? When you look at it. And it gives you some valuable information. It tells you the principal organs, and it tells you the functions. So, of the systems, so, you can take a look at that. So humans have 11 organ systems as well as the immune system. There are, you can classify these in certain ways. So you can kind of group the systems together that do similar functions. Protection, support, and movement would be integumentary. The skin protects you from toxins. It protects you from foreign, harmful pathogens, one-celled microorganisms that might make you sick. It is a barrier that keeps those harmful things out. The skeletal and muscular systems are for movement and support, like the soft tissues, the organs hang from the bones, are supported by the bones. Your main systems of integration of the functions of the body and communication are the nervous system and endocrine system. They communicate via chemical molecules that act as messengers between cells. In the nervous system, those messengers are neurotransmitters. So the nervous system consists of like the brain and spinal cord, and then the cells produce messages in the form of neurotransmitters. The endocrine system we talked about is glands that produce glands and tissues. It's not all glands, but glands and tissues that produce hormones. Okay. And then there are systems of transport. The circulatory system is about the transport of blood. The lymphoid system is about transporting a fluid that is called lymph. And that travels in really delicate little tubes called the lymph vessels. And they run often right alongside blood vessels. So you transport lymph, which is a fluid, throughout the body. So those are systems of transport of fluid, blood and lymph. Systems of intake and output include respiratory. What are you taking in with the respiratory? Air. You're taking in air. And the air, the part of the air that you use is oxygen. So respiratory system, you also exhale, don't you? And you exhale carbon dioxide primarily. So, or at least that's what you need to get out. You exhale everything, but the digestive system allows you to take in food and process it. Urinary is output of urine, which enables you to get rid of toxins and also excess fluid. And then systems of reproduction, there are differences in mammals between male and female reproductive structures and functions, right? Yeah.
During this class, will we be learning about like intersex bodies as well?
Yes. I've incorporated more about that. It's very interesting. So yes, we will. And a good question. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to get out a piece of paper, and you're actually going to work in groups of either 2 or 3. And I want you to choose a body system. So do you want me to put the list back up there? So I want you to choose one of the 11 systems. And what I want you to do is I want you to draw an outline of the body. Okay, simple, simple, simple. And then, And then I want you to draw a simple representation of the organs, of some of the primary organs of your system. So if it's a circulatory system, you'll draw whatever you think are the primary organs. And then I want you to make a list of the organ. Really, what I want you to do is to list the primary organs. At least one or two tissues that are found in the organs. And I want you to list the primary function or functions of the organ system. So choose an organ system, draw a simple outline of the body, draw representations of, so choose an organ system. Draw a representation of the main organs and where they're located. And then list on the side the primary organs of the system, one or two tissues that make up those organs, and then the primary function or functions of this system. Okay, so take about, you can work together. I really want you to think about, so choose one system with your neighbors, and I want you to figure out the biological level.
Yeah. Very, very exciting. I like
I mean.
Yeah. There it is. I'm not doing it. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. This is not very manageable. They're coming. So that's good. I'm gonna. Yeah. First and find out. We're beginning with other. You can get it for trying to find these. If they haven't provided you grades down there, you know? Yeah. Okay. What I do. That's fine. Yeah, oh my God. I think like. all the. Yeah, like. Yeah, and that's like the most important one, and I can't help you not. Yeah. Last year. Right. No one can do it. Okay. We're like. He's not gonna have me. I know, I don't know what this is. Gives us.
Okay. I feel like constantly.
And point drawing your organs. This doesn't have to be detailed. So.
Yeah. I'm not, I don't know.
It does not have to be here.
Yeah. That's what they say that,
They should have surrounded. Yeah.
yours looks like this. I was gonna weigh my mind in this up. I'm like, well, they're not, it's like a head. Alright. Okay, so here. I think it might be.
All right, so you need another minute But I'm not gonna give you much more time, because really, it's just a lovely, let's see. It should be fairly simple. You're not gonna know all this stuff. Okay, so this is the whole point of the semester. Over the point of this semester, we're gonna learn the organs and the tissue that are in the system. Hopefully, your curiosity is around, right? I'm curious to know more. You probably don't know everything. So that's what you so just as a start. Yeah. And a way to think about it, right? So what questions do you have? Anybody have a question? I thought was in I think that's the hardest part, right? How would you know what tissues make up your organs? Yeah. So you will learn that. At this moment, that was kind of a hard question to ask. We were talking about that with the respiratory system, right? What are the tissues? Well, for all of these organs, one tissue is the blood. And did you know that blood is a tissue? Before today, I didn't. It is. It is a liquid inactive tissue. So that's one that probably all have as part of the existence. But the structure is, we will be covered, right? We talked about okay, I'll give you another minute and then we're gonna move on. So we don't have questions. Yeah,
Like real. Been like Iron Man too. Yeah. But like, it makes sense. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Me.
all right. So we're gonna do, in the time that we have left, we're gonna just do a quick walk through some of our third kind of big idea, which is evolution, okay? So, and again, with this thing that you just did, this little exercise with the organ systems, I don't expect you to know everything yet. It's an introduction. And I know that that is a hard place to sit sometimes with ambiguity. But you'll be amazed by how much you know at the end of the semester. Okay. So we'll delve into these with more detail. So with this, and I realized this will be on your modules. So just keep paying attention. I realized I don't think I've posted this yet. So I will, I promise. So in terms of evolution, this is just our third big idea. And I wanted to go through it a little bit with you and why it is important. So what the objectives are to list some of the major innovations in evolution of life. You don't have to write all this down. You'll have access to these PowerPoint slides. So just you can write down some of the brief main ideas. We really, our bodies reflect a lot of the innovations that have happened in the last 4 billion years. That's billion with a B. So we're gonna try to relate two of these big ideas, which are evolution and the biological levels. So, so this is what you said in the very beginning, is that a big idea is that we are product of our evolutionary history. So, our bodies really reflect a journey, an evolutionary journey of life on Earth that reflects the very earliest life when there were molecules such as proteins that were incorporated into cells. So the earliest living organisms that we recognize as life are single cells that lived about 4 billion years ago, that had a lot of the same structures that we are built on. They had a cell or plasma membrane. They had DNA as their genetic information. So all living things share those features, including ourselves. As time went by, life became more complex and multicellular. Animals and plants that had many cells began to develop, and those required cells that became more specialized and grouped together in tissues. We share our organ systems with other vertebrates, snakes, reptiles, fish, earliest vertebrates, for example. And we are who we are. So we really are like an old house that is built of old innovations, one on top of the other. And this is one of the things about evolution. It really doesn't create new things. It builds on to what already exists. So it's like a remodeled house. You take a house that was built in the 1800s, unless you demolish it, you still have to kind of work with what you have. You might have added on some electrical wiring, some plumbing, redone the kitchen, but you're still kind of stuck with the old framework. So that's kind of like us. We're just adaptations to our environment, or kind of add-ons to an old body plan. What is this? Does anybody know? Yeah, Howl's Moving Castle, so Studio Ghibli. All right, so the first innovation in life was cells. And that is the fundamental part still of ourselves. Cells are the fundamental unit of life. It's the smallest unit that can carry out all living functions. Do you have any idea how many cells you might contain in your body? Trillions. So cells are very small, and you consist of about 200 different types that have emerged over millions of years. But you're a complex organism who has lots and lots and lots of cells. The earliest life was only one cell. And the complete organism was one cell. They were like bacteria. And for the first 2 billion years, bacteria were basically the only thing that existed. We'll return to that someday, I think, as a planet. Bacteria are numerous. They're in every crevice and cranny of the universe, and they're very functionally diverse. We ignore them because we can't see them until they make us sick. But many of them are beneficial. Bacteria are simple compared to us, even at a cellular level. They have They don't have a nucleus. Their DNA is kind of just spread throughout the inside of the cell. Or it's arranged in rings. So they don't have sexual reproduction. A nucleus that contains the DNA allows sexual reproduction. But they still had DNA, and the DNA coded for proteins. And they had RNA, which is the messenger molecule that carries out the commands of DNA. So all cells have DNA and RNA. Basically, they had the same kind of metabolism that we do. By metabolism, what we mean is that as a living thing, you have to extract energy from the environment some way. You have to eat, or you have to ingest something that you can convert into energy. They were able to reproduce, otherwise we wouldn't exist. So they were able to reproduce through the process of cell division and produce offspring that were like themselves. So our basic kind of cell structure, our basic mechanisms of protein synthesis, our genetic information, that really has existed since the very earliest life. A couple of billion years ago, something important for us happened, which is that there was a new type of cell. So the old type of cell that was reflective of earliest life were prokaryotic cells, which are bacteria. And about between 1 and 2 billion years ago, a new type of cell emerged, which is called eukaryotic. And that is the type of cell that has a nucleus with DNA enclosed in it. The other important organelle that appeared with these eukaryotic cells is mitochondria. So these cells had a nucleus with DNA, and they contained mitochondria. What do you know about mitochondria?
Produces ATP.
The mitochondria are sometimes called the powerhouse of the cell. Do you remember how many of you had biology in middle school or high school? And you had to, did you have to like bake a cake in the form of a cell or Jello or something? I did that with one of our classes one time for Halloween. I made people make, they got extra credit if they brought food in the shape somehow of a cell. Should we do that again? We had a pilot. It was great. I mean, we had some great stuff that came out of that. But the mitochondria are called the powerhouse of the cell for exactly the reason that you said. They are able to produce ATP. In order to produce ATP, they have to consume oxygen. They use oxygen to produce ATP. Not all cells use oxygen. The cells that have mitochondria can use oxygen to produce a lot of ATP. Why do we care? Because that's the basis of our whole existence. So the reason that you breathe is because you have cells that produce a lot of ATP because they have mitochondria. The mitochondria require oxygen to produce adequate amounts of energy for us to do all the things that we do every day. The reason that you have lungs, the reason that you have a respiratory system, the reason that you have a circulatory system is because of mitochondria. Mitochondria are awesome, and they're very weird. They have their own DNA. Most of your DNA is in the nucleus of the cell, but mitochondria have their own DNA because they were once bacteria. They were their own independent organism. And they were somehow incorporated into these more complex eukaryotic cells that then use their ability to consume oxygen to produce ATP. So mitochondria rock, and they're important. All right, we are so done, I can tell. So be paying attention to announcements, to Canvas. You have some Connect assignments, so if you're having problems getting the book, you need to let me know. You need your book. Is that the lab? Yes. And so, contact Adrian. Hold on, let me turn this off. And then I can answer questions.